Hello, everyone. This is W, aka William, host of the High Art on the Edge page. In today's surprise event number 2, I had the great fortune of sitting with the extraordinarily talented graphic design artist Andrew Katz. We shined a powerful spotlight on the historical and legendary band Beastie Boys. In our discussion, we uncovered all of the wonderful qualities that Beastie Boys music has to offer: humor, sampling, instrumentals, wide variety of musical styles, including hip hop, punk, soul, funk. During our exciting interview, a few special guests swung open the doors and offered up their incredible and moving connection to the band's history. So pull up a chilly chill chair, listen to our album song rankings, album cover artwork stories, and other cool facts about a band that changed the entire landscape of music. As one of the surprise guests put it so beautifully, it's all about fun and friendship. Enjoy surprise event number 2. So what you want, talk. What's that sound? Off the grid. Hello, everyone. My name is W, aka William, host the High Art on the Edge page. Welcome to surprise event number 2. A couple weeks ago, we had the lightning seeds. Today, we are shining a big spotlight on the Beastie Boys. The Beastie Boys, as you know, legends of hip hop, masters of their craft. A friend of mine, Andrew Katz, and I are going to discuss the importance of the Beastie Boys and how they impacted our musical lives. And you never know who may crawl through this door during this event. While you're listening to us, feel free to put any comments you like regarding our discussion: albums, songs, concert, merch, whatever you feel like. We want to stay connected to you through your words. And if you have an opinion, please be respectful. Remember, what we're about to share, it's all subjective and just completely for fun. So before we get into that discussion, I want to bring in a friend of mine, Andrew Katz, who I've known for a while. And I reached out to him a couple months ago regarding this event, and here he is now. Hello, Andrew.
Hey, how you doing, William? It's good to see you.
Nice to see you. So I want to get this first question out of the way. What comes to mind when you hear those two words, Beastie Boys?
That's a pretty big question. I've a big part of my life for sure. Like a lot of people my age, and I'm in my early 50s now. I largely grew up with them as far as they became household names when I was in high school, and ever since then, their evolution and their legacy has sort of paralleled maybe my own in some ways, if I can be so bold. You in high school, you're kind of a snot-nosed kid some of the time, and they certainly were that for a little while. And then as they evolved as musicians and put more thought and energy into the content of their albums, I felt like I was growing up too, and they were introducing me to music through their music, not just the songs that were on the record, but the samples that they were pulling from, because they were such pop culture aficionados. They had like Paul's Boutique comes to mind. They had all of these samples from television and things that were maybe even outside of music or music adjacent. And so nowadays, when we're in the internet revolution, we have access to lists of all of the samples. You can go back and say, oh my gosh, like look how many songs they pulled from. And you kind of realize that everything they put out was based on music that they had listened to before. So I don't know, what when you say Beastie Boys, there's a lot of things that cross my mind. My connection to the MCA Day community, Adam Yauch passing away, seeing them being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, And then, of course, my own personal musical history, being introduced to them in high school, and thinking about how License to Ill makes me reminisce for a sort of a simpler time in my life, and then also everything that comes with it, or everything that came after that, and how a lot of their albums were responses to their own growth and their own surroundings. Like, you think of To the Five Boroughs as this love letter to New York, and in the wake of 9/11. So there's so much in that question. And I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer it, but we all have our own personal music histories, and in particular, the Beastie Boys and I have our own personal music history, because it's ubiquitous. It's always on my playlists. It's always in my life, and it's the soundtrack of my life, to be sort of corny about it.
Well articulated. Just for the audience, can you tell us what you do for a living?
Oh, sure. I'm a middle school art teacher, and I just wrapped up, and I can't even believe I'm saying this out loud. I just wrapped up my 28th year of teaching, and all at the middle school level. And so, while I've gotten older, my clientele has remained the same age. And so, so
Right.
middle school is a crazy time, and I signed on a long time ago to be with them. And fortunately for me, I teach art. I couldn't teach anything else, and I use music as much as I can to inspire kids. And of course, I'm biased, and so a lot of the music I use to inspire them is some of my favorite music of all time.
Yeah. And so, and actually, I've one of the questions lined up for you here. I'm going to throw it out right now, and then we're going to start getting into these albums and have a discussion.
Hmm.
So, we all know how creative the Beastie Boys were, are. And in terms of their creativity, how do you think it kind of bled through your veins in terms of your output of creativity? Did their work inspire you as a teacher, as an artist, in any fashion?
Oh, wow, without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, I think maybe the Beastie Boys have inspired me as a visual artist more than anyone else, because of how vivid their lyrics are, and how they paint a picture with words, in a way a lot of MCs don't. And part of that is because of their connection to pop culture. Mr. Ed show, or the cucumber in a bowl of hot sauce. I mean, they evoke images in my head that I either turned into cartoons, or I wanted to find out more about things, and so it enriched my own understanding of the things around me in a way that I could bring into my artwork. So, they've always inspired me musically. I wanted to. I was never somebody who was cool enough to be a Beastie Boy. Like, I was always the guy on the side, just in awe of what they were doing. And I know there are some people who are like, "Hey, I wanted to be in the Beastie Boys." I knew I wasn't that cool, but when I listened to the music, it put me in a frame of mind that empowered me. And I think the best music does that. And I know, if you look at License to Ill and some of the problematic misogyny and that sort of thing, I'm really glad they outgrew that, or really it was probably mostly a joke at the time, and they moved on from that. So I'm really glad they did. But I'm inspired by the production. So I mean, hats off to Rick Rubin for what he did on License to Ill, and how he crafted that record. Whether or not it was as collaborative as it should have been, I'm not sure. But then credit the Beastie Boys for moving on from Rick Rubin and Russell Simmons, and not doing License to Ill Part Two, which was what Russell Simmons wanted them to do. And I think they would have been famous, and they would have had their place in hip hop history. But because they moved on from those guys, they were able to kind of point themselves in their own direction, rather than feeling like we have to do what Russell and Rick want us to do.
Can you remember specifically that moment when the Beastie Boys, their music entered your life?
Yeah, I was like a lot of other people. I missed the punk part. But License to Ill, I mean, and Fight for Your Right, which is actually, I think, my least favorite song by them. I remember when that just was a juggernaut and it was everywhere. And it was more than just a song. It was this sort of this rock and roll attitude, anti-establishment, anti listening to your parents, and because I was almost the same age as them. They're a little bit older than me. I wasn't very rebellious, but again, it made me feel a certain way, and it actually, hearing all of these different, like the bad words and maybe the bad messages when you're a teenager, that can be exhilarating.
Yeah. And did you see them in concert?
I did. I only managed to see them twice. But one of my fondest music memories of going to a live show is in 1992. So this is post Paul's Boutique, which everybody said they loved, but at the time nobody bought it. And their popularity had waned, and that actually worked out really well for me because Check Your Head came out in 1992, and I was not yet 20. I was not yet 21, I should say. And we went to this little place called Michael's 8th Avenue in Glen Burnie, Maryland in August of 1992. And the single So What You Want had dropped. And we were just in love with that song. And still, all these years later, I still am. And it was a place where high schools would have their proms. There was a chandelier in the middle, and they played this long hall, and they were all at one end. Instead of being in the middle, they were at one end. And the merch table was at the far end. And I still have the shirt I bought that night, and I still remember who I was with. And I think L7 opened for them, and Sonic Youth, and it was just it was amazing because it felt more like a punk show in a lot of ways. They played all their own music, all their own instruments, which was really rare, I think, for a hip hop group. And we were getting sweat on by them, and we were right up front, and we had moved around as much as we possibly could, and we were just dead. And we went out to the lobby, and we were kind of regrouping, and all of a sudden we heard the keyboard to the beginning of So What You Want, and we just went right back in.
Man,
it was unreal. And I saw them later on. I saw them, I think, 2007 when they played the Virgin Fest at Pimlico Racetrack in Baltimore. And that was a crazy lineup. You would have loved this. It was my only time I ever saw the Police. The Police played. They reformed for a couple of shows, and that was one of them. I never thought I'd be able to see the Police. So they were the headliners. The Beastie Boys went on before them. It was Ben Harper. It was Amy Winehouse, Incubus. It was really amazing. It was just, we're all like sweaty in a dusty infield at a racetrack, at a horse track, but it was great. And having a chance to see them. And then the last thing I'll say is I missed their second to last show or third to last show. I guess it was their third to last show. It was in Baltimore at the Rams Head Live. And we were all ready to get tickets. It was sort of a surprise show. They were doing two shows, I believe, at Rams Head Live and then the Orange Peel in Asheville, and in preparation for Bonnaroo, which was their last show. And we heard about it in 48 hours before. We got online to buy tickets like a lot of people did, and the whole system just crashed, and we didn't get tickets. So that would have been an amazing place to see them too. I've been there a handful of times, and I'm really sad I missed that show. And who knew that was going to be their third to last show? And we tried, but the everything crashed around it.
let the record be known right now. I'm kicking myself forever for never seeing David Bowie. Beastie Boys. I know.
Yeah.
That's going to be a tough one to take for the rest of my life. Okay, so for those of you who are watching, let us know where you're tuning in from. Thank you so much. My name is William. I'm here with Andrew Katz. we're going to start getting into album conversation. We're going to move quickly through these albums because there's a lot to talk about. Oh, actually, I think we have a special guest here. Oh, we have a surprise here. Oh, there he is. Who is this gentleman?
Hey, William. Hey, Andy.
Hey, Jeremy, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Jeremy Shatan, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's a
Um,
hot day in New York, but I've got the air conditioner on and I'm chilling.
So thanks for coming. I think one of you has to mute the Facebook page. There we go. Okay. Now we're still having that feedback.
Oh, we're having feedback?
Yeah, I'm hearing my voice bounce off.
Oh, hold on one second.
Okay. Andrew, I'm gonna wait.
How's that now?
Much better. Thank you.
Okay.
So, Jeremy, thanks for being a surprise guest here. Do you want to let us know how you are involved with Beastie Boys in any manner? What's your connection?
Well, I grew up in Manhattan, and one of my oldest friends is Mike Diamond. We were destined to be friends in a way because my brother was friends with his oldest brother, and there was always this idea that Mike and I would hang out. But the way our school was arranged, we were actually kind of further apart than we might have been because they did this kind of doubled up grading system until you got to 7th grade. So then when we were in 7th grade, he was in 7th grade and I was in 8th grade. We were in the same building at the same time, in the same hallways, and we started hanging out. And our main connection was just music. We were both, I've rarely met anybody who's into music as much as I am, and that was Mike. So what happened was, as I walked into his bedroom, I saw the drum set. I said, "Oh, you play music?" And he said, "Yeah." And he was taking lessons. He had a practice pad. He had like sheet music, the whole deal. And around that time, John Barry transferred in, a while later, and nobody wanted to be friends with John Barry because he was a wild man. But I was immediately attracted to him. Also, John Barry was one of the few people who lived above 96th Street, like I did. So then I came up with the idea to put Mike and John together. It almost didn't go well because I gathered us together to go see Joe Jackson. And as soon as the members started their opening set, JB started jumping up and down in his chair. And when the set ended, he went to the bathroom and Mike leaned over to me and said, "Yo, I think this guy might be insane."
That's awesome.
So I was like, no, trust me. So it took a little work, but once I got them together, we started the Young Aborigines. There's a lot of ins and outs behind that. But one of the things we love to do is go to clubs and find like-minded people. There were only so many like-minded people at our school that we wanted to hang out with or that were into the same music we were. And, after the Young Aborigines had been going for a while, they brought in this kid, Adam. They had met him one night. It's documented in their book. And I thought he was an unbelievably intelligent, hilarious, one of the funniest people I've ever met. But he could go from absurd to deep, like you're hanging up your iPhone. He had this amazing way of doing that. And so you'd be laughing and then he'd be like, "Huh, I never thought that." He just made you think a lot. So I love that about him. It was kind of funny though, because we were both bass players. So what are you going to do? You can have a band with 2 bass players. Just ask Tim Summer. But we didn't want to do that. And also they were really getting into hardcore and I wasn't into it that much. I loved the Bad Brains, a few other things, and the idea of playing that one note kind of, it just wasn't my thing. So we had parallel universes going, but I always think about the fact that if I hadn't brought Mike and John together, something would have happened, I feel, but it would have been different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And real quickly, your love for music, was that passed down from mom, dad, both? Was it always playing in your house?
There was a lot of music in my house. My mom used to wake me up from my crib with a 45 of the Beatles. At least that's what she told me. I don't have a recollection of that, but when I was sleeping too heavily and she needed me to get up, she put on "I Want to Hold Your Hand," worked like a charm. And my dad was always playing classical music. My brother had a lot of records. He's 6 years older than me. But when I really think about it, I just can relate to this kid who heard something like "Pata Pata" by Miriam Makeba, and it was almost like a drug. It just made me feel so good. So once you're doing that, once you discover that, you just keep finding, well, what are all the other different ways I can feel good, and get that jolt from another person. So I just kept seeking stuff out. And the funny thing is that, after the Beastie Boys became huge and famous, I didn't see them for quite some time until they came back from the Life Still tour and they were working on Paul's Boutique. My older brother's in the chat.
Nice.
I did tape a lot of records from Greg, but I don't think I ever stole any records from Greg, so we're safe. But yeah, that's when they contacted me to do the Paul's Boutique album cover. It didn't start out that way. They knew I was a photographer and they knew I was working in photography, and they just said, "We have this idea, we don't know how to do it." So that was my other connection, besides the friendships, that run deep.
And we will definitely
get to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Andrew, for Andrew, do you want to go by Andy or Andrew on this one?
Andy's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And actually, we have another surprise guest that has just entered. Let's bring him in. Check Mike 1, Mike 1, 2. You're there?
Check Mike, check 1, 2. How's everybody doing? All right.
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Mike Kearney is here, everyone. Welcome to our
Thank you. Thank you very much.
William, you got that buzzing going on again on your mic.
Someone's getting a haircut.
It does, yeah.
Amen.
So, Mike, how you doing? It looks like William just muted for a second. You good?
Yeah, I'm all good. No, thanks very much for having me. My name is Mike Kearney, hailing from Boston, Massachusetts, and I am, I guess, like my connection to the Beasties is I'm a founder of an event called MCA Day, which is like an annual tribute to Adam Yauch that popped up in 2012, and we just had our 10-year anniversary last year, which is pretty crazy, but that is one of my connections to the Beasties. I'm not friends with Mike D like Mr. Shatan, but I've been very lucky to be plugged in to the community for quite some time. So happy to be here.
So how's my mic now?
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you.
It's good. You're good.
Thank you, Andy, for pointing out. All right, so Mike, Jeremy, Andy, this is what we're going to do. We're going to move quickly because there's a lot of terrain we got to cover here. We're going to move quickly from album to album. If there are any standout tracks, of course, if you have any stories, any narratives you want to share, go ahead. And then that's kind of we'll leapfrog from lily pad to lily pad here. And of Jeremy, of course, we want to hear more about the photography work. But let's go all the way back to 1986. Licensed to Ill. And Andy and I, he touched on it earlier, kind of about what this album meant for him in terms for a lot of people. For me, I was going to say that it was one of those seminal moments when an album drops and you sit there and go, what the hell is this? What is this? And I clearly remember I heard Slow and Low at a party, 6th grade party, I think. And I remember I told the host, I said, can you please, she had a jukebox or something. It had the 45 or something like that. And I said, "Can you play that again?" And she did, and I was just so hooked. And then I went to Tower Records, if we all remember Tower Records, and picked that up, and that was kind of my entry into that kingdom there. So with License to Ill, clear memories of listening to this album with my friends after school, just partying to it, trying to learn all the lyrics. But I've listened to it many, many, many times since then. And as it's aged, I have found it to be incredible, not just for its groundbreaking work, but there have been moments I'm like, yeah, I can see some of it fading a little bit. So that's what I want to get in this discussion about. Some of your favorite songs, maybe then, and how that's changed now. And then we'll move quickly into Paul's Boutique. So I'm going to hand this off to pass the mic over to Andy. Andy, what are some of your favorite songs that hold up quite well for you?
Well, in preparation for this discussion, I went through album by album and sort of picked out my favorites. And so, just to echo what you were saying about some things have faded. What hasn't faded for me is sort of the connection to the nostalgia part. Like, I remember where I was when I hear certain songs. I remember high school. I remember a certain party or a certain girl or a certain friend. And I still love listening to that album. It's problematic in a lot of ways. We probably don't have to talk about today, but we can acknowledge that there's some problematic themes on there. But I still love listening to it sonically. I just the way it was cut together. And so to answer your question, I mean, Hold It Now, Hit It remains, it's an incredible part of hip hop history. And it's even the video, it's so poorly when they lip sync, it's so poorly lip synced. But the fact that they recorded it down in Manhattan on the street was, for a kid like me to see that, I'm like, where are they? I want to go there. And like, that looks like fun. I want to hang out with those guys. It was amazing. And just the whistle and the Yo Leroy thing. And of course it's just jam packed full of samples and noises. And it's all been produced by Rick. And I should mention before I pass the mic to someone else. I don't know if you know this, William, but Slow and Low is actually meant for Run DMC. They Run DMC gave them that. They're like, nah, we don't want that one. So they gave it to them. And there's a lot of stories like that about different tracks. And if you listen to it, I actually think there's a Slow and Low demo out there that Run DMC did that you could probably find.
Oh, nice.
And
Nice.
It's pretty cool when you start realizing, oh yeah, it does kind of sound like their cadence, and they were sort of trying to do the same thing as them. So anyway, I'll throw out "Hold It Now, Hit It" as my favorite track on License to Ill, and then I'll pass the mic to Jeremy, I suppose.
Well,
All right, Jeremy.
Thank you. I'm famous for being a License to Ill, I won't say hater, but I didn't like it when it came out. I was super proud that my friends had put out this record and it shot to the top of the charts and the sales and all that. But I never bought a copy. I didn't listen to it. I heard what I heard on the radio. I thought Fight for Your Right was hilarious. And I liked that because it was a little like Cookie Puss, but more produced, I guess you could say. And there was one hilarious moment when my mom came back from a ski trip and she said, hey, you know what I heard in the lodge after skiing was Fight for Your Right to Party. It was great. We all danced. And I was like, oh my God. Anyway, so I did eventually acquire a copy of the record, and I've listened to it a few times in the last few years, mainly for those things we do on Twitter where we try to pick the 5 best albums from a year. And I do think there are about 4 good songs on it. To quote Dante Ross, there's 4 good songs, but I would probably go with Brass Monkey as my favorite, because at least it's a little bit funky. And that's what I really miss. The rhythms are so square and it's very reductive musically, which was not what we were about. And I think that was the Rick Rubin influence. you know, the Long Island heavy metal kid who just fed them that. We listened to some of that, but we didn't listen to a lot of it at that time. We were more into post-punk and new wave and punk and funk and salsa and disco. And that this kind of wiped the slate of all that stuff that we had been absorbing. But it is what it is, and a lot of people love it.
Let's pass the mic over to Mike.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, this is such a funny album, like for real diehard Beasties. It just like, I mean, in the way that it comes up in conversations as well as like what it meant to you when it comes out. So this is one of those things where I couldn't tell you what I had for supper the other night, but I do clearly remember like the first time that I heard this album. I was born in the 79, and I remember riding my big wheel like around my neighborhood, and I had this little set of Walkman, and it was like a Smurf Walkman, and I just thought it was so badass. And I clearly remember riding around the neighborhood, North Weymouth, just south of Boston, and something came on that made me kind of hit the brakes, and I just wasn't sure what I was hearing. I didn't know, but I mean, like to stop the energy of a 7-year-old kid in his tracks, it was something. And for some reason, like that always sticks with me. Like I do remember the first time I ever heard the Beasties, and it was on my big wheel Smurf Walkman, something off of License to Ill. Yeah, and I think you know, it's I mean, Slow and Low, Hold Now, Hit It, like in Paul Revere. Like I remember clearly, you know, circling up like with people and years later at, you know, high school, like at middle school, you know, parties and hangouts, and we'd be belting Paul Revere like at the top of our lungs, and you'd be watching like the other people in the circle, and if somebody messed up a lyric, that was like, you know, it's like if you messed up a lyric like to Paul Revere, then, you know, it's like you weren't the tightest link in the chain in the circle. So but yeah, like it is funny, like when you get into conversations like with diehard Beasties fans, that they're like, License to Ill is that their best stuff ever, it's their best song ever. It's kind of question like how far their own personal growth went, like with the kind of parallel trajectories of the Beastie Boys. But if they're like, there's nothing better than License to Ill, it's like, okay, buddy.
But what I mean, okay, so yeah, this is what I love about these conversations. So you know, it's when you drop a track like this, and that's your statement, man, I just think that is okay. So 3 best songs for me: Rhyming and Stealing, Paul Revere, and then Posse in Effect. When that Posse in Effect comes on, that bass, I mean, my windows just shake. And see, that's the thing. So, and we're going to get into the wordplay that they use. Andrew's talked about it, and the clever wordplay, the wittiness of how they're always passing the mic when they're rotating those turns. And I think for me, over time, this album I took a long break from it, and I'm glad I did. And it's been a nice kind of a revisit, a nice reconnect to it. And I can see why people kind of diss on it for a bit, but I don't know. I think it's an incredible debut album. So, and not to mention the album cover, which I didn't really get it for a long time. And then I was like, my friend pointed out just the little details. I'm like, all right, this is good stuff. All right, so we go from 1986. We're gonna head over to Paul's Boutique here, and Andrew, we're gonna share. You're gonna lead us off your feelings on Paul's Boutique and some of your favorite tracks.
Well, you know, again, growing up, I think it came out, was it 89 that it came out? So I was a senior in high school, and I hadn't matured that much, I guess. And so, like a lot of other people, I'm not going to claim like, oh, I listened and it was incredible. I listened and I was like, wait, this isn't the same. What? What is this? And so it has, I've grown up with it, and I've grown to appreciate it as much as, you know, it's supposed to be the Sgt. Pepper's of hip hop and that kind of thing. And I totally believe that. I think what's actually missing from current hip hop is the ability, financially or otherwise, to sample the way they did. I mean, what they did on that is unbelievable. It's like you could do a whole music history course on that album because of what's sort of stuffed into the songs. And I'm sure some of it was maybe altered with psychedelic drugs, but I think we are the beneficiaries of a lot of experimentation, good, bad, and otherwise. And it broadened my musical horizons because of what they did and they didn't do. Like, they didn't do the License to Ill Part 2. They broke away from Def Jam. I think that was when they started their own record label, and that's pretty incredible. And hearing their book and hearing their stories about how they went to LA and they lived together and they partied together and they met a whole bunch of new people. I mean, that's such a healthy thing to do a lot of times, and we're sort of witnesses of that through that album because of the people they met and the experiments that they took on. So my favorite, I mean, there's a lot of favorites on there. I mean, Hello Brooklyn, talk about driving around in a car with the bass pumping. I mean, it's meant to like hurt your speakers and your windows, but I had trouble narrowing it down. I love Shake Your Rump, but I actually put 2 on my list. I put High Plains Drifter. I just love like the narrative element of that. That's another one you can just drive around. I think Chris Rock is actually on record as saying if he wants to test a new car speaker, that's the one he plays. And I Looking Down the Barrel of a Gun also. It's like so just I don't know, like that rolling sort of drum sound and the samples that they use for that. And it's a darker sound and a darker song. And man, I'm getting chills now. I just love that. I love that album. Man, I might have to listen to that later today from start to finish. It's incredible. It's incredible.
Thank you for sharing. And we're going to pass the mic over to Jeremy, who has a great connection to this album.
Yeah, that's correct. Like I said, after they came off tour for License to Ill and we reconnected, we were having lunch every couple of weeks, just catching up on this and that. I distinctly remember Mike calling me a yuppie because I like Big Audio Dynamite, but I said I don't have enough money to be a yuppie. Anyway, so what happened was we were having another one of these lunch, and they mentioned they had this idea for the album cover, but they didn't know how to do it, whereas I did, and I said I would be happy to help them. And I hadn't heard a note of it, and even though I didn't like License to Ill, this is what you do for friends: is you step up and you help them. And it's also kind of part of the DIY. I like that element of it. They weren't hiring a big name photographer who they absolutely could have done, with anybody would have worked for them, but they hired me instead. And one of the great moments of my life was being in the car, because we actually shot at 2 locations that day, first on Ludlow and Rivington, and they had booked out, I think it was 101 Park Avenue, where my brother actually worked at one time. But we were up at the roof there and we did a whole bunch of rooftop shots. But in between, we were in the car packed with all this stuff, and they put on a rough mix of the album. And I was like, this is it. This is everything. This is all the music we love, all in one place at one time, overlapping. And I just loved it immediately. So then, a few months later, I got the album and it just blew my mind. The music was just so fantastic. And Mike also gave me the DJ discs, the instrumental discs. He was like, I think it might sound a little better without our voices.
Oh my God.
But, it really is their humor and the freedom of just being themselves, within the context of those samples that were put together by the Dust Brothers. Just absolutely incredible. Yeah. If I had to pick 3 songs from it, I mean, the whole album is just great. I would probably say Shake Your Rump, High Plains Drifter, and Looking Down the Barrel of a Gun. The last one, I believe, is the only one where they played some instruments on it, and you can hear it on that tougher rhythm track. It's just so cool, and that like low-level Pink Floyd sample that's in there. I mean, they changed the entire sampling game on that record. And if you think about something like Introducing by DJ Shadow, which is one of the most emotional records made from other records, that never would have happened without Paul's Boutique. So
Tell
it's
us.
a masterpiece, and I couldn't be prouder to have been involved in the cover. We had no idea that it would become considered one of the best album covers of all time. The funniest part was how long it took to go gold, because it really sank like a stone. I think they sold about 12,000 copies at first, or maybe 25,000 copies. I'm not sure. And I went over to Mike's brother's house once, and they had the gold record. It took about a decade, I think, to go gold. And I said, "Oh, you got one of those? I should get one of those." He goes, "Yeah, you can get one too, as long as you're willing to spend $150 on it." I was like, "Yeah, that's okay."
So, I'm sure you've been asked this many, many times, but since this is the first time you and I have met, I do have to ask you. So, Andy alluded to Sgt. Pepper's. We could talk about the Beach Boys, Pet Sounds album. These, and not only just the album, but the album covers being so historical. What is that feeling like when people come up to you and go, "This album cover"? I mean, give us a little bit of that.
I just think it's kind of a happenstance feeling, because we were just doing our thing. We didn't have permits. We were out in the middle of the street. I was literally in the middle of an intersection, huddled under the tripod with the cable release, calling out action like a movie director. And we didn't know what would become of it, but I have to say that Capitol Records, even though we all know the funny story about how they decided to work Donny Osmond instead of the Beastie Boys, but they did a bang up job. It's like the original, if you get an original pressing, it's like triple coated, very shiny, beautiful printing. So it's a kind of combination of high and low, I think, is one of the things that makes it work. It's got that huge lens flare, which I just love. To me, that lens flare is like liquid energy. It just comes into the shot and it makes it really alive. I think that's a big part of it. But obviously, being an 8-panel fold out, you're kind of putting your thumb on the scale a little there as far as making something impressive. But it really needed to be that way. So it's just a very proud product of, I think, a friendship, of invention, creativity. It's just a great part of my life.
Are there any little tidbits, nuggets you can share with us that people don't catch on the cover?
Well, you do know that we did finally figure out what all the album covers were. Of course, now I'm not going to be able to remember them, but it took decades for people to figure them out. And I was always annoyed that I didn't run over there and snap a Polaroid or something, because I would have had the answer really quickly. But so that's kind of cool. If you go on Reddit or Twitter, you can search it up. All those little album covers. They brought all that stuff. They styled that stuff. I think my favorite part of the whole shoot was not having seen them in concert on the Licensed Ill tour. I didn't really know what to expect when I called action.
Okay.
Because they were just kind of standing around sort of milling about, and I called action, and then they started performing for this rotating camera. And I was like, oh my God, these, because the last time I'd seen them, they were on the stage at CBGB or in the kitchen or something, the kitchen, the venue, not literal kitchen, doing the Beastie Boys thing, which was very different from what they did as, the punk rock thing was very different as what they did as the hip hop Beastie Boys. Yeah. So that to me was a central moment. I was like, oh, this is going to be good. And the fact that we didn't care if you could see them, do you know what I'm saying? So it's just so much fun.
Yeah. And I bet there's just gobs and gobs of more stories to this iconic image. So we're going to pass the mic over to Mike. Mike, how do you feel about this album?
So, it's just funny because I haven't spoken about this album with a group of people in so long. So like, as I'm sitting here, like listening to, all these different stories, it's really taken me back to that mindset that I was in, like when I first really discovered this album. And I was just thinking that when I think about Paul's Boutique, I'm thinking about this image of like the Truman Show, like when he finally gets like to the end of the world and he opens that door into this like whole new world that he didn't know existed. He just kind of existed in this bubble. And I really feel like Paul's Boutique did that for me. I feel like it just blew the doors open in terms of like how I saw the world, how curious I was, like to not only know more about the Beastie Boys and their world lens and where they lived and like where they hung out, but you know what they were experiencing, like to allow them to put these words and lyrics and music together. It really just kind of blew it wide open for me. And I think you asked Katz at the top of the show, you know, like what are the two words that you think of when you think about the Beasties? And for me, it's like friendship and fun. And I think that this album is like, it's just all in here. It's baked into this cake like so seamlessly. And yeah, I mean, I remember hearing this and it just like magnified my curiosity for everything. Like this is how I developed my superpower of curiosity and my like still kind of present everyday work, like being a mental health counselor, just like being, you know, ever so curious about people like in their world. And I feel like this album was a catalyst for that. So yeah, fun, friendship. And this is like when I really just kind of like signed on for the Beastie tour, you know, like for the lifelong kind of ticket. Songs, Sounds of Science and Eggman, like were two of my favorite songs to just like sing by myself, like with a tape in my room, as well as like with my friends. You know, I would like scribble lyrics. I remember scribbling, you know, Beastie Boys lyrics on the stalls in my school bathroom, and like the administrators didn't even like need to question who did it, but I didn't care that they would know it was me. I just wanted the world to know about this new world that I found, and I found it through Paul's Boutique.
So when this album was released, were you kind of out in front and waving that banner like, come on, everyone, you got to check this out? Or did you have a group of friends?
For sure. No, I mean, I was definitely, I mean, I found this and I brought it like home to the village. Like, and it's funny because I didn't find it when it actually came out. I found it, like I found Check Your Head actually first, like, and then I backtracked like to Paul's Boutique. So Paul's Boutique flew under my radar, and I had heard Check Your Head, and I mean, I know that we'll talk about that in a minute, but I started to kind of like find myself in Check Your Head. But then when I found like Paul's Boutique, I backstepped and I kind of like found myself in the world. And so I kind of simultaneously had both of those experiences with those two albums. But yeah, Paul's Boutique was like the one that I couldn't wait to just force my friends. I'm like, sit down and listen to this. I'm like, it was everything.
And it still holds up so incredibly well
Yeah.
today. It is phenomenal. All right. So, all right. You named your tracks. That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, for me, I'm not going to go through all the details and how I feel about the album. I think it's pretty evident on my face. It truly is a rich mixture of sounds and hip hop and bass and experimentation. I do want to know from someone, do we know actually how many samples were used roughly? I don't know. If anyone wants to answer that.
I don't know a number. No, it's
Yeah.
hundreds, right?
Some people say millions.
Can you imagine how expensive? There's no way you could do that now. No way. All right. So top 3 songs for me.
Let me just interrupt. Wikipedia says there's 105 songs sampled.
105?
That's a low ball.
That seems low to me.
24
right,
samples on the last track alone.
Okay. All right. Shake Your Rump, High Plains Drifter. People forget about 3-minute rule, Full Throttle to the Bottle. And then one of my all-time favorites, A Year and a Day. A Year and a Day. That rapping on that it's extraordinary. And they make it sound so damn easy. And I know it's not. We have some people tuning in. We have Greg. Thank you, Greg. We have Gabriel. Yeah. We have I thought Farrell McLaughlin. Thank you for tuning in. He says I first heard Beasties at 14, was on a school trip to Japan. And then Greg says I worked at 101 Park for 10 years, but not at that time. Fun fact, my first law firm represented the Beastie Boys in the 1980s and 90s. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so we move on from that historical album to another historical album. And Andy, we're going to pass the mic over to you. Let's go Check Your Head.
Well, Pass the Mic is the perfect segue for this album. And I've been waiting. I'm excited about talking about this because I did a homework assignment before I got on this call with you all because I wanted to be prepared. So I went through the exercise of putting my favorite albums in order of the Beastie Boys, or ranking them, if you will, which I don't like to do. But I did it anyway, knowing that the easiest one for me was number one. And that is, for me, Check Your Head. That's my favorite album. It has my two favorite Beastie Boys songs on that album. So for me, it was a no-brainer. Also, because of the story of seeing them for the first time live in 1992, August of 1992. I was 20 years old, and I saw them. I'm never going to forget that. So it's a very biased personal opinion, but I love being able to go out on that limb and claim it as my number one. The fact that they played their own instruments, that they changed it up again, right? They went from License to Ill to Paul's Boutique, which was sample heavy, and all of a sudden they come out and they're playing drums and bass, and they're slowing it down, and they're really speaking to their punk roots on a few of those tracks. Amazing. Like it's such a like hodgepodge of different approaches to making music, and that's one I can just listen to straight through. And I would say both sides, but it was probably on a CD when I got it the first time. It was probably in a long box too. Remember those long boxes? Yeah, there it is. And of course the cover, Glenn Friedman's photograph of that. It's one of my bucket list spots to visit. I know it's not necessarily a really great spot in LA, but I still want to go there and pay tribute. I think it's near the Capitol Records building. And I could do a whole show about Check Your Head. I love it. I won't do that to everybody, but I do want to mention that I struggle. I have a number one song and like 1A and 1B, and they're both on this album. It's So What You Want, which is the name of this episode, if you want to call it that. And I know Jim Shearer from the Brouhaha has done whole episodes about the song So What You Want, and the covers and the stories behind it. And I've never heard anything like it, and I have never heard anything like it since, and before or since. And it's one of those songs I've heard it a bazillion times, and I can still like really get into it. If it came on right now, I would move and I would get up and I would say every lyric. It's just an incredible song. And then I'm on record elsewhere as saying that Pass the Mic is my number one all-time song. And the reason for that is I think they are at their absolute apex with Trading Rhymes. Some of the lines in that song mean a lot to me. The first line that Yauk says, "If you can feel what I'm feeling, then it's a musical masterpiece." Come on. I mean, it's awesome. And then they say, "So put your worries on hold, get up and groove with the rhythm in your soul." I mean, that's poetry. It's amazing. And there's three quintessential lines in that song too. And I just recently, I think I stole Mike Kearney's thunder, because at my son's graduation, I finished my speech about my son with the line, "This is what I got to say to you all: be true to yourself and you will never fall." And so that album and that song and those two songs mean so much to me, personally, and as a Beastie Boys fan. And I'm getting kind of choked up now. It's emotional. I love talking about it, and I love that we have a chance to share what these songs mean to us. There's a lot more from that album that I could talk about, but I'll stop there.
Man, that
I
was
can
great.
pick it up from there. It was interesting because I was talking to Mike while they were making the album, and he told me about how they'd rediscovered their instruments. They were playing their instruments again. And a big part of that was that they discovered looping, where you can jam for 2 hours and then take the best 30 seconds and loop it. It was super easy to do that by that point. And Mike was like, even Neil Young does this. I was like, really? He's like, I was like, the secret of rock and roll. So I had a little bit of an idea what to expect when the album came through, and I really, really liked it. I thought the edge was great. You know, just the sound of the instruments was very cool, and obviously picking up with, you know, some of the other players who were involved. You know, getting Mario Caldato on production. Money Mark was a huge get. I mean, what a happenstance, another happenstance in the Beastie Boys career, where they got this guy who can literally play anything on keyboard. He was such a great addition. And, you know, that's his organ, right? On So What You Want. Just fantastic. As I remember, I loved Funky Boss. And I said to Mike, I said, I wish that song were longer. And he just goes, you know, Jeremy, always leave him wanting more. I'm like, yeah, that's showbiz, dude. But I if I had to pick my favorite songs from that, it would probably be Gratitude, which we haven't mentioned yet, that greasy bass line, which I had the pleasure of playing on stage at MCA Day a few years ago. Just learning that bass line connected me back to Adam's creativity and his funkiness. And it's a really great bass line to play. So I just love the song Gratitude. It's got a great message, just a great groove. I would also have to go with So What You Want. It's an all-timer. And Pass the Mic, sure, I'll pick that one. The whole album is just a lot of fun, filled with great little details, a lot of heart and humor. So I was amazed.
I love that quote that you gave us about, you know, always want them leaving more. But here's the thing. There's, you know, we're going to get into this with Hello Nasty and Paul's Boutique. There are so many tracks to these albums. I think sometimes people feel like it can be over bloated at times. So it's
a long album.
Yeah.
It does, you know, they were definitely in the CD era length there.
Yeah.
Almost an hour long. But
right.
I don't know. It holds up all the way through for me.
Yeah. Thank you.
Maybe it's a little front loaded with the greatest songs, but you wouldn't want to shake your head without Professor Booty, you know. and Namaste is a great ending, just chills you right out.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. All right, Mike, your turn.
Yeah, kind of same thing. I'm sitting here and I'm listening to people's individual stories, and I'm just like smiling ear to ear as I'm looking down this track list. And there's just like this crazy montage of memories and just kind of like pictures of like where I was and what I was doing. Like when I heard this album, and I was just thinking, you know, how, I mean, whether it's a like professional athlete or like a wrestler, everybody has like their song that they kind of come into. I think if I was a wrestler, I would want to be like in an arena with lots of, you know, aisles, because I would want this whole entire album like to be my intro music to like whatever arena that I was walking into. And yeah, and like there's two words like that I use quite frequently, and it's like resonance and dissonance. You know, like the vibrational energy elements. And I think that this album, when I heard it, was like one of those like first like real moments of my life where I feel like I really resonated with something and with something new and different. You know, I just kind of picture like two guitar strings, like when they finally kind of hit that sweet spot and they're in like perfect vibration. That's exactly what I felt when I first kind of heard and found this album. And it's still something like that I continue to excavate and even like find new parts of myself today, even though I've listened to it thousands and thousands of times over. Yeah, I mean, like you said, this album is front loaded with some absolute whale tracks, like an Even Gratitude. It was always one of my favorite tracks on the album. And it was just like interesting, like 2 years later when I was doing like the MCA Day events, you know, it's like we have the word gratitude. It's on pretty much every single one of our posters that we've done. And that was our, you know, kind of main motto. Like, this is why we're getting together. It's just like to kind of share that sense of gratitude and how lucky and grateful we are that like the Beasties got together as friends and kind of shared their music and their like in themselves, like in their lives with us. It's just like a profound sense of gratitude. That's why that song always holds like a nice warm spot for me. And yeah, you know, Time for Living, I remember playing that at parties and doing like the air guitar until I was just like out of breath, and singing like Professor Booty, like in Live at PJ's. I mean, everything. It's there's so many layers to this album, but it's also this like one thing. It's amazing.
So I'm gonna thank you for sharing, Mike. I'm gonna share some albums that came out in 1992. Extraordinary albums, may I remind you. All right. I'm a massive fan of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. So Henry's Dream came out in 1992. We also had Sugar, Copper Blue, Stereo Lab, Guided by Voices, Propeller, The Cure, Wish Album, Dr. Dre, The Chronic, Rage Against Machine. Another one of my favorites is Tom Waits, Bone Machine, PJ Harvey, of course, REM, Automatic for the People, and then we get Check Your Head. I mean, what a phenomenal fucking year for music. Okay, this album for
And you
me,
didn't mention the debut from Luscious Jackson came out in '92.
That's
Church
right.
of Nanny.
Thank you.
Which had
Yeah,
Life,
well,
Life of Leisure on it, one of their best songs.
we could have a whole show on 1992 albums. To me, this album represents one thing and one thing only: where I was in my life, so lost, so confused on what was going on with my moral compass. And I used to visit a friend of mine, went to UC Davis at the time. And when I'd visit him often, he had some rowdy roommates. And I swear, I cannot believe they were never kicked out of this dorm. They used to, when I arrived at Davis, they would pump this album on, and just like your ears would be ringing for hours, and it was just incredible. And that's what I remember from this album. And Andy, I'm glad it's like the moment you spoke about this album, I could feel that energy, and from all of you guys, that buzz that you when you articulate your thoughts. For me, this album has the greatest Beastie Boys song on it, and it is this. If I were ever a ball player and you had your walk-up music, this is what it would be.
This next one is the first song on our new album.
They launch their albums with these phenomenal songs. It's like they waste no time. They want you to get right into that world and feel it. So Jimmy James is my all-time favorite Beastie Boys track. It's a track that I remember when teaching, when I was frustrated or I needed that lift, I would listen to that song, and it just kind of, I would always be in my head, you better watch out, kids, because you don't know what's coming.
Hey, William, can I interrupt you for a second? There's two little things about that song. I'm pretty sure the song is about Jimi Hendrix. Is that right? And then the other is, I think it's Robin Zander from Cheap Trick, who has that saying at the very beginning.
Yeah, that's from the Live at Budokan album, I believe.
Yeah.
All right. That's all I wanted to add.
Jimmy James and the Blue Flames was when Hendrix first came to Greenwich Village. That's what he called his band.
And these are the little nuggets I love. So Finger Licking Good. I mean, Funky Boss, Best of My Gratitude. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Then it has that nice little kind of break in the middle a bit, but then Something's Gotta Give comes in, and then Stand Together. Another track I feel that people kind of forget about, but damn it. Yeah, it is. It's my number 2 Beastie Boys album. My number 2. Okay, so it sounds like we could keep talking about that album, but we got to keep rolling through this. So we're going to go to 1994. Is that correct here? We're going to go to Ill Communication. Andy, what were you doing in 1994?
I was let's see, in 94, I was in college. I was in art school. And I would be graduating in about a year. So I think this album reminds me of some friends I met at that point in my life that I still have, where I was in college, but I went to an art school. And I commuted. So I didn't get the live away at experience. So I had a lot of friends who went to state colleges, Penn State and Maryland and West Virginia. And on the weekends, I would go see them. So I would live vicariously through all of my state college friends, and I would party with them on the weekends. And I was constantly couch surfing. But this album reminds me of that time because I would be listening to it constantly. And I mean, there's some. I'm also a really big Tribe Called Quest fan. So one of my favorite tracks of all time is "Get It Together," where I think the story is that they were like high as kites recording that song, and then Q-Tip doesn't even really remember it, but they got him on. They recorded his voice, so what you hear is what you get, I guess. But I love the hits off that album are great. Sure Shot, Root Down, just amazing. I don't know. Those are my favorites, like Pass the Mic and all of that. It's similar when they're trading rhymes and they're being goofy. And there's also, this was when videos were really supporting the song. So you would, I can't help but imagine, I just picture for a Sure Shot, them, I guess they're in Las Vegas in tuxedos and they're mugging at the camera. And I love all of that. I love, because you feel like you're sort of part of the party. Right. Yeah, so I'm trying to think of where I put it on my list. It wasn't at the top. It was number 4 for me. So I love Ill Communication. But to your point earlier, William, I don't know that I was at the best point of my life at that moment. I wouldn't say I was lost, but I didn't have direction. And so when I hear those songs, I think of those times, mostly about having fun with my friends and couch surfing.
Was this when they were started working with Spike Jonze?
Well, yeah, because Sabotage is on there, right?
Yeah.
And Sabotage is on my list too. And it's almost like too obvious an answer, right? Because it was so, again, like So What You Want. I hadn't heard anything like that before. Here's this guy like screaming into the microphone, and it was born out of, I guess, punk and that kind of thing, but it was, I guess, a little more structured than that. And I think the story is that he was yelling at who was the producer on that album?
It was
Mario Caldado.
Mario, yeah. So it was he was yelling at Mario. That's the whole, like I guess he came in later after they had laid the music down and just yelled all these things into the microphone that didn't really make sense. And that's the song.
So good. All right, Jeremy.
George Harrison always said that he saw Rubber Soul and Revolver as kind of two sides of a similar process. I don't know if I 100% agree with him, but I think Ill Communication and Check Your Head are very closely related. They seem to be, a lot of continuation between the two of them with the hardcore songs and the mixture of funk and soul and jazz and all the different things they put in there. So, but the fact that it's continuing on in a way, almost making a double album out of the two of them, and it's just as good is kind of astonishing when you think about it. And I never forget listening to it for the first time and hearing Sabotage. I'm just going, I can't believe it. They made a classic rock song. It has an element of classic rock of something from the 70s, just that groove, and the way Yauk plays the bass like a guitar frustrates me to no end because I cannot do that. I tried so hard for MCA Day. I'm sorry, Mike, but that's why Jim had to play that song. I cannot do it. I'm not a guitarist. I'm a bass player. I use my fingers to play. Anyway, so it's even more impressive because of that. And it's one of Horowitz's best ad rock, one of his best vocals ever. The fact that he could pull that off like that, it's just fantastic. I love Sabotage. I will be unapologetic. I don't care if it is the obvious answer. It's just so good. Sure Shot is also fantastic. what a great way to start an album.
Yeah.
And then you've got Root Down, which is super funky, great use of samples. Love it. And, I'm just looking at the page of the song list, and it's, when you think about an album that has Root Down, Sabotage, and Get It Together all in a row, and that's an embarrassment of riches. I would hate to not have, the Q-Tip drop on there, and it's so good. It really is a fun album. Once again, Mario and Keyboard Money Mark, huge contributors. I think Eric Bobo was also in the house by that point.
Mm.
So that extra little bit of grease to the rhythm really helps.
Were you still in strong communications with the band?
Oh yeah, definitely. With Mike mainly. We just talked all the time about music.
Yeah.
And we had a funny kind of thing going where he would call me. Sometimes we'd talk for a while, and he'd say, "Hey, are you going to Tower Records? Because I'm looking for this record. I can't find it. So if you see it over there, pick it up for me." And they would literally cut a check from Grand Royal to reimburse me. So I would go to Tower. I remember very distinctly getting was Lee Dorsey, The Great Googa Mooga, which was a 2 CD compilation, I think, on Charlie. All the best Lee Dorsey stuff, mind-blowing collection of stuff. And so I picked that up for him. And the great part about it was that I get to tape. He didn't care if I broke the seal. So I would tape it, and then I'd pop it in the mail. It was just but it was one way that we, just kept in touch about stuff. We literally talked for hours about music. Nobody else, very few people in my life where I could do that with them. So, and it was just great to hear all the influences continue to come on this album. Even though there were fewer samples, there still are samples and a lot of influences from the past. So just the way they put that all together is just fantastic. And Bruce Davidson on the album cover. How could I compete, An unpublished Bruce Davidson photograph is just so cool.
Mike, how do you feel about Ill Communication?
So yeah, I've got bushels of love for this album, and like, if I'm not mistaken, this is probably like the shortest time gap in between like their two albums. And I think I remember listening to some kind of an interview with the boys, like where they said that it's like after Check Your Head came out, and they had really kind of like found themselves, and they were operating at such a high level, like that this album kind of came the easiest. It's almost like a continuation of that album, and they kind of tightened up their process a little bit. So it's like some fans might think that this is a little bit more of like a contained, tighter version of Check Your Head. But yeah, I mean, this album popped like when I was coming into high school, and if I was, harvesting all these new elements of myself with Check Your Head, I feel like when Ill Communication came out, I was ready to like take that harvest to market. Like I had found myself there, and I was just kind of comfortable and had this new sense of confidence, in large part because of Beastie Boys music, that I was ready to kind of go out into the world and be like, what? Like, this is it. And so, yeah, it's like the confidence in this album was just, I just ate it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Favorite tracks, obviously, like you guys talked about some of the bigger ones. I used to burn like B-Boys Making with the Freak flute loop and Do It. Like those songs were just so fun. And this is also like when I started to dig into like the samples, not just like appreciate them, but I was like, where did this song Root Down come from? Oh, who is like Jimmy Smith? And this is when I really started to kind of branch out and find like that new music, like through their samples. So yeah, this album is fucking amazing. Like, love it.
I don't even know. Oh man, I love the enthusiasm that is just emanating from your mic there. No, it's so. How about this? 1994, Downward Spiral, 9 Inch Nails. Definitely Maybe, Oasis. A Juggernaut, Live Through This by Hole. Dummy, Portishead. Super Unknown, Soundgarden. Blur, Park Life. I mean, list goes on and on. Ill Communication, 1994. I was in London. I was at a club. Sabotage came on. The place went nuts. And I would go clubbing all the time because I was studying abroad over there. And it was Common People by Pulp and it was Sabotage that I remember clearly. Everybody just moved to that dance floor and just went nuts. And yeah, it's an extraordinary body of work. Um, I don't even really know how to give it much detail. You guys kind of said everything I need to say about it. To me, it's the percussive work that I love. It's got the elements of their hardcore days. I love the instrumentals, the jazz feel to it. It has another great song that I feel like people kind of don't talk about. Maybe that's what my theme is, the scoop. And then, of course, Futterman's Rule, I love. And Sabotage, Sure Shot's hard to beat that one. But yeah, it's
interesting to think about in the context of '94 that you had Beck coming out with Mellow Gold that year, which in some ways picked up on Paul's Boutique. So they they're in the middle of their career and they're already starting to compete with their earlier iteration in some ways. And then they were also down and dirty with Nas Illmatic, which a lot of people think is the greatest hip hop album of all time. I don't agree, but it's a good album for sure. And it made a big splash. And then you also had Outkast coming out. So just in the world of hip hop, they were in the ring with some real heavy hitters and holding their own entirely.
It was my number 4 album. All right, we're gonna move into the next one here. So we go from 1994 to where are we going? Hello Nasty.
Hey, William, I'm going to call an audible here and put Mike on the spot and reverse the order since I've gone first every time. So, Mike, will you do Hello Nasty and I'll finish up? I'll go after Jeremy.
Hells yeah. All right, let's get right into it. This is my number 1. Hello Nasty is my favorite Beastie Boys album. I'm coming out swinging. I don't care what genre. Okay, like for me, music, it's like an ABC, anything but country. I don't care like what genre. I would put Hello Nasty as the strongest 1-2 first and second song opener for like any album, any genre. Super disco break-in segue into the move. If I'm ever like low energy or if I'm off on 2 wheels, if I play tracks 1 and 2 from Hello Nasty, Super Disco Breakin' in the Move, it is fucking on. This is my favorite Beastie Boys album. Yeah, it's, same thing. Well, actually, I guess similar to, like the last album we were just talking about, Ill Communication, it does have like a little bit of all the things that they love. It's got some punk. It's got like, like the instrumentals, it's got like a little bit of everything. Yauk and Ad Rock are like singing these like sonnet songs, and it just it's like if they kind of like found and iced stuff down on the last album, they just kind of leveled up here and just let it rip. 3 MCs, 1 DJ. Obviously, like the Intergalactic video, Body Moving. Like Remote Control is still like one of my just kind of random deep cut songs that I don't feel is like celebrated enough. And then I don't know, Yauk, like that's still such like one of the most hauntingly beautiful songs like I've like from the whole entire catalog. And then just when you think that they're going to downshift, they come back with like Grasshopper Unit, like a Negotiation Limit File. I mean, like Unite, Pictureless, Electrify. It just keeps hitting, and then just like when you think that they could go out with a bang, they just like kind of nestle you down and just kind of ensure that you have a soft landing from this incredible journey that you just went on with like Dr. Lee and Instant Death. And it's just like it's an emotional album that I just feel like dongs your heartstrings and just takes you on such a ride. But fucking Hello Nasty, if I was gonna get a forehead tattoo, it would probably have something to do with this album.
I love how vehement you are about this, and I gotta know, since we're on a roll here, I want to know how you feel about the album cover.
I mean, it's probably like one of my favorites. I mean, I'm just kind of staring at it right now, and just like the fact that it's like not. I mean, it just looks like such a candid moment of them just having fun as friends. Like if you look at their facial expressions. I mean, Ad Rock's facial expression is just like hilarious. Yauk is just kind of cracking up. Mike D's got that like scary look on his face. And the fact that they worked it into like the lyrics, it's like packed like sardines in a tin. It's, I mean, even like the font and just knowing like, I forget like what album that they got like a lot of this design and just like the space kind of module inside. It's yeah, I celebrate it. Let's go.
Man. Okay, Jeremy, good luck.
Well, this album has a lot of complexity in the way it relates to my life. For one thing, 1998 was the year my son was diagnosed with cancer. I don't want to bring the mood down, but that's just the way it is. And I was literally in the waiting room. You know, at the time, I was a working photographer, and I was literally in the waiting room in the hospital when I got a call, picked up a message from Mike. They were looking for someone to do the album cover for their next record, which was Hella Nasty. They were working on it at the time. So somehow, in the midst of all this chaos that was going on, I managed to get my portfolio over to Nasty Little Man, which was their agency, you know, that was helping them with PR and stuff like that. A few weeks later, when we reconnected, he said, you know, Jeremy, we all decided that your work was just too good. They wanted something sloppier. And you know, I was a still life photographer. Everything was very precise, very controlled. The Paul's Boutique, you know, lens flare thing, I loved that, but that didn't really work in the context of the book covers and magazine stories and things that I was doing. So, you know, I totally got it. And the fact of the matter was I might not have been able to work on it anyway because of what was going on, spending so much time in the hospital. Then the album comes out, and unlike all the other times an album came out, I did not get a copy. They always sent me everything. I had the root down, I had the Avio et Oleo, In Sound from Way Out. I always got a copy. So we were actually literally in the hospital when the album came out. And Steven, Michael's other older brother, who's unfortunately no longer with us, he comes in and he's like, I brought you a copy because I knew my brother has no class.
Oh, geez.
So that's when we finally got to hear Hella Nasty. And there is actually literally a video of our son was in and out of the hospital. We were at home and we're listening to Hella Nasty. He's in the high chair. He's bopping around and he's loving all of it. He loved music. So, but in the background, you can hear my wife and I talking like, I don't know about this song. No. Oh, wait, this song is really good. And by the end, we had it programmed to, and this is their longest album, I believe, 67 minutes. Come on, man. So that's a double album, maybe even a triple in the old vinyl days. So I actually had a high-tech CD player at the time. Unfortunately, it's broken. I still have it in the closet, though, because I don't want to let it go. Sony ES, where you could program up to 100 CDs with what songs you want to skip. So when you popped it in, it would remember every time you played that, it will not play the songs you didn't want to hear. And I use that feature because, you know, we all know the term CD bloat. And I think this album was a victim of that. So I had it down to about a 35-minute absolute blast of a record. Most of the songs that I eliminated were the ones that I felt they were trying to do too much traditional hip hop. To me, that was not their strong suit, and I didn't really love it. So it was a bit of a complex reaction to it. But I do like it a lot, and I'm always fascinated to find the people, including Ad Rock, as we learned from the book, that it's his favorite album. But I will pick some songs from it. Body Moving, Intergalactic, what a 1-2 punch right there on the first side if it was an album. If it was an LP. Really, really great. And then I also have to pick Dr. Lee, PhD. We loved Lee Perry. I discovered Lee Perry listening to Jamaican radio, the Jamaican DJ Gil Bailey in my bedroom on AM radio while falling asleep. Next day, I'm down at J&R Music World buying Lee Perry album. It was just the greatest sound I ever heard. And the idea that they got to work with him, it was just a wonderful feeling. Just seeing his name just gave me a wonderful feeling. It was kind of like when they played Saturday Night Live and, you know, with Elvis Costello and that whole thing. So that just made it, there was a kind of a feeling of pride that I had that, you know, we came up from being fans to then working with your heroes.
Well, the fact that you put that song towards the end of the album and that name, right? I think that's
Well, maybe that's because I believe he broke Sean Lennon's flute while they were in the studio. I seem to remember some story about he broke something while he was there. He was a little bit of a wild card character, but that's one of the things that made him so great.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a favorite song of mine. That would go on my all-time Beastie mix.
Nice.
And the cover, I have to say, it's fine. It's funny. I'm not saying I would have done a better job, but I just think it's a little. I think it looks actually that's one that looks better small on the CD. I'll be honest.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. All right, Andy.
Well, I'm really glad that Mike and Jeremy went before I did on this one. I actually would really like to hear Jeremy's edit. I really can appreciate the fact that you had edited it down to like your favorite. I should probably just say off the top, I love that we're having this conversation because we don't all agree. This being Mike's favorite and Ad Rock's favorite, but this was my least favorite. And maybe it's because I had the least, personal connection to it. It doesn't really bring up a lot of sentimental memories for me, which that's not why we all love music, but that's why I like a lot of the music I do. It reminds me where I was and what I was doing. But I am really glad that Mike brought up the track "I Don't Know" that Yauk sings or speaks. It's beautiful, and I think I was I found it late, and it was almost like this gift from the universe because you think of the Beastie Boys and you think of like punk influence and pop influence and pop culture stuff, and there's this little gem of him just singing this little song, and it's just beautiful. And I encourage anyone who's not familiar with it to check it out and just really listen to it because it sounds. You're
right about that. Sorry to interrupt, but that's an absolutely gorgeous song, as is. Picture This with Brooke Williams. I've been on the hunt for more Brooke Williams. There's not a lot to find, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the thing about Yauk singing that song is you can maybe it's because he's gone also, but hearing his voice so clearly and it's him, and it's even if you hadn't found it on that album, you'd be like, this is Adam Yauk. What? Wow. And it doesn't match anything else. I just love it. I'm so glad. Like the last time I was in New York for MCA Day last year, I was there early and I walked down to Adam Yauk Park by myself and I put that on the headphones and walked down. I'm like, damn, like this is really cool. This is really cool. So I don't have too much to say about Hello Nasty. I did like, I think at MCA Day, Billions McMillions was there and he had something to do with the inside of that album, I believe. And I think he was proud to have been named Billions McMillions by Adam Yauk. Yeah. His real name I think is Bill McMullen, and he's like Yauk said you should say that on the phone to him, and he's like I can't believe I didn't come up with that myself. Like that's the perfect nickname for me. And Yauk I think coined that nickname. So that's all I have to say about Hello Nasty. But I think it's so cool to hear Mike. Talk about that. And I think maybe that speaks to when we hear albums in our life too. You hear an album and you're like instantly graduating from high school or on a vacation with friends or whatever it is. But I think there's that intrinsic piece to all of this that we're like maybe responding to with our likes and dislikes.
1998. Thank you, Andy. We have Elliott Smith, Pulp, Offspring, Jay-Z, Garbage, Pearl Jam again, David Gray, Queens of Stone Age, and then we get Miseducation, Lauryn Hill. God, it's like these albums come out, you forget like how many strong contenders, right? There were at that time.
I think we should also mention, Grand Royal was really ruling by 1998. The Grand Royal label. If I look at my 1998 list, you've got things like Money Marks, Push the Button, Sean Lennon, Into the Sun. Those were both on Grand Royal. There may have been a Luscious Jackson album that year. I'm not sure. There was a lot of different things coming out from them. And it was so much fun to get those packages in the mail and see what else they were working on. I also remember having lunch with Mike, and he handed me a copy of Moon Safari by Air. He had got a promo. He was like, I think you might like this. It's one of the best albums of 1998. And I liked it so much that I did something I almost never did, which asked him for a second copy to give to a friend.
Nice.
He complied.
Man, Mike, you said it beautifully. And I agree with Andy. That passion really resonates. And it's an album that I feel like you just have to if you're not a massive Beastie Boys fan, this is it tests you. It kind of challenges you in a variety of ways. I understand why people feel like it is over bloated. And I do want to ask you, Mike, at any time, do you feel like they could have trimmed down some of this?
I mean, that's a hard question to answer. I mean, I think they were probably at a place in their lives and their growth, where they didn't feel the need. I feel like they were so comfortable sharing themselves with the world and just kind of putting themselves out there that, it's like I feel like it speaks to their authenticity that they showed everything that they were doing and feeling and experiencing. That would be like me going into, hair and makeup, to cover up blemishes. They were just oh, natural, this is us now. And here's everything. Here's literally fucking everything.
Yeah. No, that's it. Favorite song, Super Disco Breakin', Body Movin'. God, I love Unite.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Lee, PhD. Great stuff. Okay, let's keep moving along here. We're going to go back to Mike. We're going to go to the 5 boroughs.
All right, so I'll just come right out and just say that this is probably my least favorite Beastie Boys album. But I also very much understand it, and I understand why it needed to be made and why it kind of came out how it did. It's we're talking about how, I mean, well, you know what, I'll just go with me personally. There's all these Beasties albums that came out at the perfect time in my life. I was skating and just kind of figuring myself out, with Check Your Head, and then through a communication, in Hello Nasty, it opened my eyes to what else was going out in the world, in Tibet and all this other stuff. And then with To the 5 Boroughs, I think it changed my lens to being not only is there so much going on in the world, but there's also some really fucked up things that are happening right here, in our country, that affect the rest of the world. And so, I mean, if I'm wrong, then jump in and correct, but I feel this album was kind of rushed to get some of the messages out, and kind of raise the awareness about some crazy stuff that was going on, with George W. Bush, in the administrations and all the stuff, and 9/11. And it was just all kind of dialed in. And for that reason, I think that because things got so serious in the world, that some of the fun was not really evident on this album. And for that reason, it feels a little sterile to me. It feels a little bit rushed, and it feels they didn't have time to really get into their process as much, because they knew that people really needed to hear the words that they wanted to say. They knew that they had the platform, and I feel it was kind of rushed out a little bit. There's some dope ass tracks on here. I mean, check it out right now. And there's some incredible lyrics on here. It's also one of those albums where I feel the instrumental element doesn't quite accompany the lyrics it does. That marriage feels a little stressed on this album. Probably if somebody asked me what is one of my least favorite Beastie tracks, I always say Crawl Space. I don't know, again, it's just, I know some other people love it, and it's it's an individual experience, but yeah, there's some things that don't quite click on this album. And but yeah, that's just my own personal.
Well, I can say the same. If I'm being completely honest, I will say I have never gotten through this album all the way through in one sitting. Never. It's dry as a bone to me. I understand some people love it. It's dry as a bone. It feels very much like rote hip hop. Like the beats are just so simplistic in a way, and just kind of, it just felt tired the first time I heard it. I don't even own a copy of it. I never got, but I have listened to it over the years. Just I keep trying. I think I just turn it off halfway through every time. It bores me. I'm sorry. It's just, and I know that it was like the post 9/11, we're going to bring New York back. The sentiment felt great, but I just do not like it. And when I look at my 1998, 2004, what else was coming out? It was not a big year for hip hop for me in general. You had Matt Villainy, which is brilliant, and the Pretty Tony album by Ghostface Killah. A lot of cool stuff on that album, but they were up against the Libertines, the Walkmen, Wilco, A Ghost Is Born, maybe my favorite album by them. Just too many other good things coming out as well. If I wanted to feel comforted, I would listen to In a Safe Place by the album Leaf. It was not going to be the Beastie Boys. So maybe part of it that it's just that time of my life and what the context of music that was going on, it just didn't fit. Maybe one day I'll come around to it. You never know. It took me 30 years to like Basement 5. If anybody knows the Basement 5 album, 1965 to 1980. It's one of the greatest albums ever made, but literally I hated it for like 20 years. So you never know. I could come around to it. Over to you, Andy.
Now, I appreciate everybody's honesty. This is also in the bottom part of my list, but I do have some. I love that. I love Check It Out, and I love Triple Trouble. And I think Triple Trouble is one of those songs that I love because I kind of liked it, and then I rediscovered it again when I realized I was watching Wild Style, the movie from the 1982 or 83. And Double Trouble is in that, and they come out, and at the end of the movie, they start rapping, and it's Triple Trouble. And so you realize that the Beastie Boys are consistently mining early hip hop for some of their lyrics and their vibe and their songs. And I love that. That's one of the things I love about hip hop in general, is that they pay tribute to themselves and they sample each other. And they also introduced me to Spoonie G, right? So they in all of their songs, they drop these nuggets of musical knowledge, and it makes you want, if you're interested, you can go back and find what were they talking about and why did this inspire them. So the fact that they went all the way back to 82 with Double Trouble. In fact, I was just with Lil Rodney C in Brooklyn a couple weekends ago at this Wild Style event, and I mentioned that to him. I'm like, man, how cool is that? The Beastie Boys. And he's like, yeah, like, I was like, did you feel good about that? He goes, yeah. He goes, they did everything through the record company, but it was nice. And I said, well, don't worry. I'll make sure everybody knows that was you. That was you guys. I'll spread the word. And, it was cool. And I think that's what I love about hip hop, is that it's kind of interconnected, and it's such a finite bunch of time. We're not talking about way, way, way back. We're talking about pretty recent history. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of To the Five Boroughs. It came in at 6 out of 7 for me albums, but yeah, I definitely listened to it. I did like that they got somewhat political. I like what they went out on a limb and said some things. I'll never forget a guy I worked with came in my room one day. He was another teacher, and he's like, hey man, I got the new Beastie Boys album, and he goes, I don't understand why they can't just play music, just rap. I don't want to hear what you have to say politically. And I'm like, really? Like, to me, art is, push the envelope, put your message out there, for better or worse, especially if you believe in something. So I was glad they committed to a stance and said who they were and what they believed. And they didn't need to get too political, but I did appreciate the fact that they were brave enough to do it.
So, are you done, Andy? I don't want to cut you off. Okay. This is one album that I used to love. I cherished, and I was with it for about good 4 or 5 years. And then I started seeing the cracks. I started feeling like, wait, maybe this isn't holding up as I remembered. And maybe because what was going on in my life at that time, what was going on with the country's vibe and sentiments, I really absorbed and sponged up. I loved it, had this kind of pop and fuck you attitude. I mean, they have a song, Hey Fuck You. um, and it really has taken a tailspin and a real nosedive into, it doesn't sound nearly as fresh to me as it used to. I still enjoy it. And Mike, you mentioned the song. What was your least favorite song there?
Crawl Space.
Yes, thank you. So I ranked these songs 1 through 5 and actually had that at 2.5, my lowest score for any of the songs on that album. Yeah. There's still some great tunes on here that I love, but it takes time to build. I love the rapping there. Rhyme that rhyme well. There's a sense of urgency, immediacy. Has that? That's it. That's all. Reminds me of Hello Nasty. Feel to it, and of course, an open letter to NYC. I really enjoyed, but yeah, it doesn't hold up, but still a good album in Beastie Boys lore here. So that was my number 6 album. All right, let's move on. Michael has joined us. Actually, Michael, I do want to share that he wrote, "Greetings from Belfast, Northern Ireland, gentlemen. Not to get too deep and heavy into our past, but music has always been somewhat of an escape from the troubles. And as a 12-year-old licensed ill was joyously subversive breath of fresh air. I had quite a lucrative business in school for stealing VW badges. As I grew older, the Beasties' musicality grew too and broadened my mind to all types of sounds. And it's led me to creating friendships with like-minded fans around the world." Thank you for sharing. Okay, let's go back to Mike. You want to take this one?
Where are we going?
We are going to the mix-up here.
This was like, this album kind of hurts because I missed, they put on a show like at a very small venue here in Boston, and I unfortunately wasn't able to make it. And it's like one of those concerts that kind of hurts that I didn't get to go see. I think I have it like right down in here. This is kind of like one of those fun albums I just like to throw on. Like if I'm driving, and I remember like that I've done a couple music videos like for school and work, and this is kind of one of those. It's like I jump like to In Sound From Way Out, as well as like the mix up like for some perfect background instrumentals. But I mean, like there's a lot of super fun tracks on this one. I won't harp on this one too much. I definitely I definitely love and appreciate and respect like all their instrumentals, and just like their style. And some of my favorite photos of them just in general, it's like when they're all dapped up, like in the hats and ties and jackets. Like this is just like a fun one, but I won't spend too much time on this one. So I'll go ahead and pass it to Jeremy.
Jeremy, your thoughts on the mix-up?
The mix-up is an interesting one because, they put out that In Sound From Way Out that collected all the instrumentals, and it was a lot of fun. But then when they made this purpose-built album of instrumentals, I have to say I find it quite boring. I listened to it recently because on Twitter, we were doing the 5 albums from that year. And I was really kind of surprised at how dull it was. It just, I don't want to be too harsh, but I really had no interest in listening to it again. And it was surprising to me because those instrumentals on the other albums are so good and really did hold up as a full album or EP on the In Sound From Way Out. So I don't even really consider it a real Beastie Boys album, to tell you the truth. I wouldn't rank it. If I did, I guess it might be above To the Five Boroughs, but that's not saying a whole heck of a lot.
So what is it that you did that didn't speak to you?
What's that?
What is it about this album that didn't speak to you?
It just, there's a lack of energy. maybe there was too much looping on that one. I'm not sure, but it just does not rise above its influences. It doesn't inject. It's almost too respectful of those influences, you could say. They're almost really trying to be that thing that they were kind of just taking a wild leap at before. But it was funny because I was looking forward to like really digging into it when we were doing that year. And then I was like, oh, really? Okay. So yeah, disappointed. I was disappointed.
And what do you think about? I'll talk about the drum work later. But are there any songs that kind of captured your attention?
I have to say that I don't really remember any of them. They just did not stick.
Okay.
It's just kind of one thing after another.
Fair enough.
Maybe, I mean, when I'm looking at the song titles, the Kangaroo Rat sticks out. Maybe I did like that one. Or maybe it's that I just like kangaroo rats. I think they're kind of cute.
Whew. All righty. Andy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not going to say too much about this. I kind of agree with Mike and Jeremy wholeheartedly on that. I actually, when I made my list, I put a little asterisk next to this because I don't really consider this a Beastie Boys album, like a full album, because being such a hip hop fan too, I need lyrics. I need MCs. I need that component. And so in some ways, an album that's all instrumental feels like incomplete. It feels like maybe they could have rapped over something, or they could have sung over something. So I don't consider this. So when I've been talking about 7 albums instead of 8, that's what I mean. I don't. It's almost like when an artist has a compilation album. It's not a standalone. We created this piece of art to stand by itself. I know that they did in this case, but it's, to me, it has really no place in my memory of their album canon.
Does anyone know why they pursued this for this album? I don't know the backstory. Jeremy? No.
Not really. Just what I read in the Beastie Boy book, that they were just really into playing. I think they felt a new kind of mastery in the studio. I know Ad Rock really got into just working hard at playing instruments and polishing up his skills in that way at that time. So maybe they wanted to show that off a little bit. I was just looking at some notes about it, and it seemed that they announced they were also going to put out a vocal version of it, that they never did. But some of the people they were talking about having on that ended up on the next album.
Okay. Got it. Are you gentlemen familiar with Jah Wobble?
Absolutely. Jah Wobble was the original bass player for Public Image Limited. Fantastic bass player. One of my biggest influences as a bass player.
Okay.
Aston Family Man Barrett, Peter Hook, Jah Wobble. Those are like the big 3. He's still out there. He also does a lot of like electronic.
Yeah.
And
so that's how I see this album, for whatever reason.
Type stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I see this album. It's in the land of mediocrity to some really great tracks. And I agree, Andy. It doesn't. I put an asterisk too. It doesn't really fit, but I understand. But to me, I don't know. Put it on at a party to some friends. You have a good time. The Rat Cage, great. I really enjoy it. Off the Grid, I love. But yeah, it is kind of there's none of those breathtaking moments that kind of really hold your attention. So it was, if we're gonna have to put it there, it was my least favorite. So there you go. And we're gonna wrap it up. Mike?
All right, Hot Sauce Committee, part 2.
Yes.
Yeah, let's go. I think that this album, like for the fans, that we had like the Hello Nasty 98, right? And then To the Five Boroughs 04. And I think This is probably like the longest that fans had to wait in between some albums for them. So I feel like we were just super, super hungry. Yeah, I do love this album. There's also this element, and it says it right in the title. It's part 2, like where I also want part 1. I wanted more. I feel like they kind of got back to like the friendship and the fun that was maybe dialed down a little bit, like for To the Five Boroughs. And I feel like they kind of got back to both like saying something and having fun and the friendship element. And you could tell like that this album was put out more for them like than for the fans. But yeah, like there's some just random ones. Like even like those, like the small little tracks, like the Larry routine is still like one of my favorite songs, like to little kind of snippets like that always puts a smile on my face. And one of the my favorite tracks, surprisingly, is like the very last one, like the Lisa Full Force routine, where they're just like so kind of dialed in, like in finishing sentences and falling over it. And like for that to be the last one, and to have it just cuts off like so short, it kind of leaves you thirsty. And then the fact that this was their last album that they put out kind of like magnifies that thirst. And so while I love this album, there's parts of me like that really want to hear some of the other tracks, not just because like I miss the Beasties like in new music so much, but because like I feel like this album kind of like set you up for that. So yeah, and for a while before you had to pay for it and you could just make it on your phone, like the Make Some Noise was my ringtone. So every time someone was called, it's like down, 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 and it was just so yeah, Funky Donkey, like Larry, Tadlock's Glasses, Lee Majors. Yeah, I loved it. I just want more.
I mean, we all know that this was a troubled creation. It took several years. In between the two albums, MCA was diagnosed with cancer. We were all very distressed about that. It just did not sound good when he was diagnosed. So the fact that they were able to get back to work and put something together was very moving. And I think that we could also, as much as I criticize the mix-up, I think their instrumental prowess, just putting together these very polished tracks, translated to this album. But now they had songs and vocals and, you know, just really, really extraordinary use of keyboards. I think Money Mark really stepped up and raised his game on the album. It's, like I said, it's very polished, but it's also very funky, and it includes all those eclectic influences. I remember there used to be this website called Record Label, RCRDLBL. Does anybody remember that? Mm-hmm. They would give you a free track every day, free MP3 you could download. And one of the ones they had was a remix of Don't Play No Game That I Can't Win. I think it was a Major Lazer. That brings you back, right? Major Lazer remix. Mm-hmm. And I just loved it. I thought that was just absolutely fantastic. And that's probably my favorite song on the album in general. I'm don't always love everything Santa Gold does, but she was definitely like-minded, you know, an eclectic artist who came up listening to a lot of the same stuff we listened to, and putting her on there was perfect. And I also always liked when they had a female voice. Too Many Rappers is pretty great, especially when that video was discovered. It really made me pay more attention to the song where they're running around the supermarket. And it was cool that they got to work with Nas. Longbird the Fire is, I love that song title so much. I might like the song title more than the album, more than the song. But on the whole, it's a really great listen. Mm-hmm. And as Frederick said in the chat, if they had to end, Hot Sauce was the way to go out. I know we all dream about Hot Sauce Committee Part 1. There's being this long lost album out there. That doesn't really seem to be the case. There may be a track or two here or there that didn't make the final cut. We would just want more. And the fact that they ended involuntarily, so to speak, is really just a tragedy. But, you know, just thinking about all the work they put into that album, and it really is a beautifully polished piece with a lot of variety. Over to you, Mike. Or Andy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm so glad we can talk about this album. I feel like we never did as a community. I feel like, because of what happened to Yauk, and because it was their last album. I love this album. I there's some songs on there. They're my top Beastie Boys songs ever. One of them, and it hasn't been mentioned, is Nonstop Disco Power Pack. That track is so good. Like, that's a great Beastie Boys, an example of the Beastie Boys. I just love it. I love what they did with it. I learned all the lyrics to it. You know, I would drive around when that album came out in 2012 and just listen to it. Oh, I had to get all of the things right. And I feel like it's a bit of a unicorn now. Like, I don't think a lot of people know that album because they didn't tour it, right? They didn't really get it out there in any meaningful way because of everything that was happening outside of the music. And I think it cost the album sort of like its proper place in their legacy. I love that album, and it's from what I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. I heard that they created it as almost like a joke to audiophiles, to people who love to find samples. They created fake samples for people to find. And they don't leave. And didn't they create a fake track list, like a printed track list of
all these little album cover thumbnails. Let me tell you something. Probably a good thing I wasn't really living on the internet back then, because I would have gone down a rabbit hole looking for every one of those.
Right. And it was like this big, it was like a joke to their fans, like, or people who like to kind of deconstruct things. There was nothing to deconstruct. They made it themselves. And I think that in itself is brilliant. Like, who's made an album of samples that don't exist and then created a backstory for all these fake bands and artwork and all that stuff? It's funny. That's got to be like a Yauk thing too. I would think like he had a big hand in some of that. Just like almost like the joke is on us, even though they're not laughing at us, they're laughing with us. Like, look at what we did. We created this goofy thing. And the songs are fun. Like the song "Okay" that Mike features on. I love that little song. It's so different. It kind of like, it's almost like a new wave song. Man, I really do love that album. Make Some Noise, the video that went along with it, all of the famous people that signed on to be in that video. It's great. It's got a life of its own. Long Burn the Fire. I love that. And Jeremy mentioned it. I don't know, William, if you know this story. I'm pretty sure Mike does. But the video was not officially released for not Long Burn the Fire. It was the Nas one.
Too Many Rappers.
Yeah, Too Many Rappers. So the video was never released. And there was a guy, Ian McLaren, who lives in Ireland, and he stumbled upon it on the internet. He found it, and he's like, "Hey, has anybody seen this video? This is really cool." And next thing you know, it was a news story. And in the Beastie world, everyone's like, "Dude, you found a Beastie Boys video that no one has ever seen before." And then they had no choice but to acknowledge that, yes, we recorded this video in Nashville. And it's this really great little tour of Nashville, and they're running around in the grocery store and the Parthenon down there and on the street. And I've been down there and visited all those spots because of that video. And then just a little side story. I know we're running long, but when I went to MCA Day last August, the night before MCA Day, I went and saw Rage Against the Machine at Madison Square Garden. And I'm about to sit down in my seat. And who's behind me but Ian McLaren, who found the Too Many Rappers video. He's like, "Andy, how's it going?" I'm like, "That's crazy. That's a sign from the universe, right? That you're in the right spot at the right time, man." It was incredible. And I love that album. And I'm so glad we have a chance to talk about it, because to me, I never got to talk about it or listen to it with my friends. It was just like, here it is. And then everything bad happened. And we didn't get to kind of enjoy it the way you're supposed to be able to enjoy a record.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that it was probably about 6 months after the album came out. I was at a new music concert. I often went to these concerts, and I would run into Hester Diamond, Mike's mother. We were also friends. I was friends with all the Diamonds. And so she was sitting right in front of me, and before the show started, she turned around, she said, "Adam's sick." I said, "Wait, but I thought he was in," she had just gotten the news that the cancer had come back. And so I think that's kind of got wrapped up a little with the album to me, which maybe is why I don't put it on as much as I could. Yeah. But it really is a good album. Mm-hmm. But I just remember I was just stunned And having been through so much with cancer in my life by that point,
Yeah.
I knew that there was not going to be a miracle at that point. So
Right.
I think it just became wrapped up with that. And maybe when Ian discovered that video, it kind of brought the joy back a little bit to that album. So that was a big moment.
Yeah.
It's I think, Mike, you said you're kind of left you wanting more, right?
Yeah.
I think going back to your earlier statement, that's exactly what we want, right?
Mhm.
We want like there's such a it's an album that is filled with to me astonishing at that time, just astonishing body of work, that a collective piece that seems to amalgamate in a way that is fun. It's I love some of the rapping on here. Andy, you mentioned it. It has I put that I put it at number 5 as my 5th favorite Beastie Boys track, Nonstop Disco Power Pack. Some of the bass work on here, I love it. If you're gonna end, why not end with this, right? And I don't know so much the history like you guys do with this album, and thank you, Jeremy, for sharing the personal stuff there. But to me, it's going to be an album that I think people are going to continue to talk about more and more as it grows with age and time. And yeah, I think it's a great album, and I actually just recently picked it up on vinyl, and it crackles just beautifully to these speakers. So it's good stuff. Before we wrap this up, if you can do me a favor, and I think Andy already mentioned it, but and what is your all-time favorite Beastie Boys track? Can you declare? Can you state what it is? So, Andy, you want to remind the audience?
Yeah, sure. I'm on record now a couple times. Pass the Mic is my favorite, with So What You Want being like a 1B, if I can cheat a little bit and do that. And they're on
You're
the
a
same
teacher.
album.
You're a teacher. You can cheat all you want.
All right, cool.
Okay, Jeremy.
One song?
One song. Yeah, one song.
I'd go with Gratitude. Why not? I love playing it and I love listening to it.
Mike?
I was going to say Gratitude, but I feel like it's not really fair to have two of the same answers.
You can copy me. It's okay.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to flip it up and go with Nettie's Girl. No, that's impossible.
Yeah, I remember watching the Skills to Pay the Bills video with that has that Mike in the canoe or something. What is he? Is in a rowboat? I don't remember what it is.
It's a little paddle boat.
So hilarious.
Yeah,
we could do a whole conversation just about their humor.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, I'm gonna pass on that one. That's tough.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I'm going Jimmy James. That's my number one. And
so let me just point out, just in my own like support, that the people that participated and picked their favorite songs, all of those are on Check Your Head. So I think that's their best album. I'll put it out there.
My album rankings are Paul's Boutique number 1, Check Your Head number 2, Licensed to Ill number 3, Ill Communication 4, Hot Sauce 5, Hello Nasty 6, To the 5, 7, and then we're gonna call Nick's 8. So that's my order there.
If I had to rank the albums, I would still put Paul's Boutique number 1 as an album. But Check Your Head would probably be number 2, Ill Communication number 3. Then things get a little ropey. They get a little more even to me. I'd have to think about it some more. But those would be my top 3.
Mike, Hello Nasty number 1.
Yeah, I go like with Hello Nasty 1, Check Your Head 2, Paul's Boutique 3, Ill Communication 4, Hot Sauce 5, and To the 5 Barrel 6.
And Andy, what are yours again?
My number 1 is Check Your Head. Number 2, Paul's Boutique. Number 3, Licensed to Ill, just because of the impact that it had. Ill Communication, Hot Sauce Committee Part 2, To the Five Boroughs, and Hello Nasty is my last one.
I'm going to give you guys the last word. Andy, anything else you want to say about Beastie Boys?
No, I just want to thank you for doing this.
I would only say that it's still somewhat astonishing to me because I can't listen to the Beastie Boys without connecting it to all the relationships that I have over time and personally and things like that. So it just makes me so happy that they touch so many lives. And the Beastie Boys fans are an incredible group of people. Really just fantastic. Thanks, Greg, for the album cover ranking. Paul's Boutique. Yes, that is definitely the best album cover. But I would just say it just never ceases to amaze me, and they got, best new music in Pitchfork. They, what I mean? They made their mark on music. And even though it was sadly cut short, the long burn the fire. It will never go out. And it really is remarkable when you think it started in John Barry's loft, a bunch of high school kids who had no idea what they were doing.
Love it. Mike?
Yeah, it's been fun to kind of take a trip down memory lane today. And I was just, thinking about some of the periods of my life where I was like a feverish fan. And I, can honestly say like that it's like I never wanted to be a Beastie Boy, but I just like wanted to hang out with them and just, be around them and see like the world that they saw. And I think, as things progressed, like in their career, I found out that, like there's Beastie Boys everywhere. I mean, I've met Beastie Boys in my own life. Like I consider Katz like to be a Beastie Boy, and Jeremy, like, and all these people that I've met like through MCA Day. And and it's just like through like immersing myself in their music, I've been able like to kind of develop my own lens of how I see the world. And I think that Beasties isn't just a band and music, it's more like a mindset. And so there's some Beastie shit going on in the world every day, and there's Beastie Boys and B girls and be everybody. So it's been a blessing and just full of gratitude.
I'm going to echo your sentiments. 2 words. This has been great, fun, and a friendship that has developed. So thank you for all 3 of you coming on here and sharing your passionate energy about this truly historical band. I know we ran over time. I'm totally okay with it. I think, why wouldn't we go over time with this? We're talking about one of the most legendary bands of all time, and what the seminal work that they did. So thank you to all 3 of you, Andy, Jeremy, Mike. My name is W, host of the High Art on the Edge page. If you like this event, we got a surprise event number 3 coming up on July 11th. That is we're going to go from hip hop to a little bit of rock with, we're going to focus on a band called My Morning Jacket. That will be surprise number 3, My Morning Jacket on July 11th. To all the Beastie Boys fans out there, thank you so much for tuning in, for sharing your thoughts in the chat here. And as always, keep listening to great music. It's a good thing. And thank you so much, everyone. Ciao.
Cheers, guys. Have a great day.
Guys. All right. Thanks.
Peace.